Anne Frank. Here's a picture of her and her family. Anne Frank was a German-born writer and diarist. Her diary has been one of the most read accounts of the Holocaust. Anne Frank had a wartime diary that was published and has been the basis of many films and plays. It was shortly before her 13th birthday that she obtained her diary and began writing. I have the authority to speak on this because the information has been published and has been the basis of films as well as plays. First, I will discuss how it came to the Franks going into hiding. Second, I will discuss how Anne Frank and her family went into hiding in 1942 in a secret apartment behind her father's business. Third, I will discuss how they were discovered and captured in 1944. Anne Frank was born in Germany in 1929. 4 years later, Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany. Adolf Hitler and his Nazi government started aiming at persecuting Jewish citizens. In 1940, Germans who entered World War II invaded the Netherlands and made life dangerous for Jewish people. Between 1942 and 1944, over 100,000 Jews were deported and sent to concentration camps. In 1942, Anne Frank's mom received a letter ordering her to report to a work camp in Germany, and that's when they decided to go into hiding. They left a false paper trail suggesting they fled to Switzerland. Now that I have told you about what led them into hiding and how Jewish people were being basically executed, I will now tell you about Anne Frank and her diary. Anne Frank and her family were joined in their hideout by a few of her dad's business associates and a Jewish dentist. Anne Frank says there were narrow stairways leading up to the spot, and to the left of the hallway there was an opening that serves as the Frank family living room and bedroom. The next door is a smaller room, the bedroom and study of the two young ladies of the other family. And to the right of the stairs is a windowless washroom with a sink. The door in the corner leads to a toilet and another one to Margaret and Anne's room. She says it was very small up there. A friend of theirs said because there are so many houses being searched that it would be a good idea to build a bookcase in front of the door that leads to their secret spot. The first 3 days in the secret annex after having the bookcase built, they all walked around with bumps on their foreheads because the doorways were so low, she says. She also says that many of their Jewish friends are being taken away in droves, being treated poorly, and transported in cattle cars. They are being murdered. The English radio says they're being gassed. The people get nothing to eat and hardly anything to drink, as water is only available 1 hour each day. Men and women sleep in the same room, and women and children often have to have their heads shaved. Now that I have told you about some of Anne Frank's diary excerpts, now I'm going to tell you about some of the suffering Jewish people had. Night after night, military vehicles drove around and knocked onto doors to ask if Jewish people lived there. If so, the whole family is being taken. They often go with lists where they know there will be a big haul. It is near impossible to escape them unless you go into hiding. They frequently offer a bounty as well, so much per head. Anne Frank writes in her diary she reached a point she could care less whether she lived or died. Jewish people were also required to wear the Yellow Star of David and could not own businesses. On August 4th, 1944, a little over 2 years in hiding, Anne Frank and 7 others were captured and sent to a holding camp. Someone close had tipped them off to the authorities, and they were captured in their hiding spot. Anne and Margaret Frank were spared immediate death in the gas chambers, and were instead sent to a concentration camp. In March 1945, the Frank sisters died of typhus. They were thrown into a mass grave. Several weeks later, in April, the British forces liberated camp. First, I discussed a little background to the start of the war and how Anne Frank and her family went into hiding. Second, I discussed about Anne Frank and her diary and some of the stories written. Third, I discussed how they were captured and what led to their death. Anne Frank wrote in her diary something I find inspiring, especially because of her circumstances. She said, "It's utterly impossible for me to build my life on a foundation of chaos, suffering, and death. I see the world being slowly transformed into a wilderness. I hear the approaching thunder that one day will destroy us too. And I feel suffering of millions, and yet when I look up into the sky, somehow feel that everything will change for the better, that this cruelty will end, and that there will be peace and tranquility will return once more. In the meantime, I must hold on to my ideals. Perhaps the day will come I'll be able to realize them." Anne Frank.